Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Michelle Perry, and I'm the Vice President of Service Delivery and Web Analytics here at Practical Data Solutions. I'm excited that you've joined us for today's webinar on visual analytics and the power of Excel. Joining me today is Scott Everett. Scott, thanks for joining today. And it's beautiful here in the Northeast, and we finally got some rain, so I'm pretty happy today.
That's great. I'm here in Utah. It's hot and dry.
So today's visualization is really key to any analytics strategy. As you can see in this example, visualizations are very eye-catching. They can be interactive. And these visualizations really allow us to improve the communication of the data.
Yeah, and what's great about the visualization technology that's out there is that you can really take limited data set like patient satisfaction data, where what you can do is you can come in, and because it's interactive, you can very easily identify outliers, maybe your lower performers, really filter down and see the individual providers, and even filter down and see, particular satisfaction questions that may be driving those scores, so that you can take action and work on improving those, getting them where you want to be. And really, this visualization technology that's out there, that's where we all want to go. Visualization is easy, it's intuitive, it looks good. It's the state-of-the-art technology that really is helping us to drive data-driven organizations, where we can get in and we can drill down, where we can get to that one source of truth that really helps us be able to communicate what's going on within our organization and take action to be able to correct any problems and to emulate our higher performers.
Yeah, so Scott, here are some of the leading web visualization tools that we're seeing being utilized in healthcare. With Power BI, QLIK, and Tableau, those seem to be the leaders today with many of the organizations that we're working with.
Yeah, and so, let's take a look at an example of what can be done. This is a visualization that was done in Tableau, where you were able to look at, patient access metrics and really even dig into something like cycle times, where you can take the amount of time the provider is actually spending with the patient compared to the amount of time that was scheduled in the provider's schedule. And sometimes when you can reconcile those two numbers, it makes it a little bit easier to find available access capacity and clinical access in a provider's schedule. So this is just one example of what can be done with these visualization tools that are out there.
Yeah, one of the advantages of using visualization is the ability to consolidate metrics into a single page. So rather than sending a provider 8 or 10 single reports, we can consolidate those into one visualization. Let's take a look at an example of a Power BI physician compensation visualization, where I have several data points that I've blended together on one page. So this allows the provider to see multiple key drivers of their compensation basically at one time. I can see my booked rate along with my patient satisfaction scores, and even down toward the bottom, I've got some appointment date. I'm looking at my bumped rate, my panel size goals. So this really allows me to open one visualization rather than having to open multiple pages to really understand where we are with the compensation.
And really, when we're talking about, reports we're distributing to providers, a lot of times this one page is what they need. They want to be able to take a quick look at what's going on in the way that they practice and move on from that. But there may be other areas of the organization that needs more. So if you look at something like a reimbursement team, the contracting staff, they may want more information with regard to the provider. So you can take a page like this where you may be looking at, underpayments based upon the fee schedules that are out there. You look at the overall payer performance with regard to denial rates or the reimbursement rates that are out there, where you can look at denial recovery rates and things like that, or AR management. This is one way where they can look at it, but maybe they want to drill down even a little bit further and get more particular with what's out there. So they can maybe look internally where you can import the fee schedules and compare it to your charge master, and you can see where are we undercharging, which particular codes and which particular providers are we leaving money on the table with regard to what we're actually charging for the services that we provide. Or we may want to look at, our allowed amount evaluations in the contracts that are out there, where we want to understand, which payers have certain procedures that they contracted for less than Medicare. And, are the things that we can do with regard to these particular codes where we can help bring those up in negotiation. Or maybe we want to benchmark our payers against each other and look at the overall reimbursement, whether it's a reimbursement by RVU, whether it's a reimbursement as a comparison of Medicare. What we're really trying to do is look at these payers, compare them to each other, and give our contracting staff information that they need in order to be more effective in their negotiations.
Yeah, so Scott, those are some great first look at some visual web dashboards. So let's look at an example of a dashboard that was designed many years ago, probably by you, Scott, designed this dashboard back in the day. And it's got some great information. I've got some cancellation counts and no-show rates. It's got some visualizations at the bottom where I can see how things are broken out, whether it be by day or appointment categories. But that grid, there's a lot of data, kind of hard to stand out where there might be some opportunities, even though the dashboard is very effective. How might we go about changing this to make it look a little bit more appealing and allow us to highlight data?
Yeah, so what we did is we wanted to go in and we redesigned this dashboard where we have all of the same metrics, but we put them into a more visual format where you can see there are trends down there, and you can look at the trends and you can see immediately are the trends going in the direction we want to go to without having to digest those small numbers on the page. We can look at, the gauges to see where we're performing with certain metrics compared to our targets. And then we have some call outs where the numbers are larger, where they're immediately able to be seen. And then we have kind of red, yellow, green in those circles to say, here's where we're doing well, and here's some areas that may require some immediate attention. Really taking this, making it more visual, you're able to make immediate snap judgments within seconds of looking at this dashboard. And the thing about this dashboard, Michelle, the visualization tool that we used to create this, it's Excel.
That's very impressive, Scott. I like it. So when we've just seen a couple of visualizations, we saw an example of Tableau, Power BI, PDS Empower, and even that last example of Excel. So no matter what tool you're utilizing, the design process is the same in order to deliver effective visualizations. The process, no matter what tool you're using, you're going to want to follow that same process. So let's review a couple of those best practices. So when you're starting to design a dashboard, obviously the key is making sure you've got the right metrics for the right audience. You want to design the dashboard to make sure that it focuses on the key metrics that you're trying to represent, an area of opportunity or somewhere where you need to improve, denials. Scott showed some contract reimbursement rates. And you want to make sure that those visuals are appealing, not only with the data, but visually appealing. Using color is great, but you want to make sure you've got some white space. You want to make sure that you use colors that are complementary and not too many colors. You don't want to be distracting. Another thing that can be distracting is if you've got charts, all over misaligned on the dashboard. You're going to lose focus. People are going to be looking at that. Why aren't those aligned, rather than looking at the data itself? So you want to make sure that you look at the overall process and features of the dashboard. And then you've got most likely you have got some good reports or good dashboards already today. Use those as a starting point. Don't start from scratch. You've got some good reports that you're already reporting to your executives with those metrics, use those rather than starting from scratch. So let's take a look at a few examples where we've implemented some of these best practices into visualizations. So here's a call center dashboard with, we've only got really 4 graphs on here. I'm looking at total calls, my calls to that were sent to voicemail, and I can easily, go through the different divisions. I can select particular months, and I've just used color and really a background to highlight and make the dashboard more appealing for the end user.
Yeah, and a lot of times what we want to do is we want to be able to take these visualizations and focus the user on a couple of key metrics that are out there. So for example, this one we're looking at revenues and expenses, where we can come in and we can look at the trends that we're seeing, but then we can also look at our net revenues. And you can see right away the net revenue where they're negative jump right off the page to the end user, and they can see the particular periods where our net revenue wasn't where we expect it to be, and we can start looking at how that may impact budgets moving forward.
Yeah, so here's an example. Let's look at an example of a physician compensation where I'm really providing the provider with their key element, which is that projected work RVU. That's what the provider wants to know, is what am I going to get compensated for? So I've got that highlighted in the top left, but I'm also providing those supporting metrics. So I've got work RVUs, I've got patient satisfaction, and then I'm looking at my current month compared to last month, as well as a 6-month average. So this allows me to use both key metrics and supporting metrics within one visualization.
Yeah, and these are the types of examples that we can see that, visualization can really be kind of an art. In addition to providing data, you're providing a picture that really gets our end users to where they want to be, and, again, helps us to become more data driven. Well, the issue that we have with visualizations is that we're not just trying to do a picture. Visualizations are great, but if we just stop by printing a PDF and going that way, we're not really taking advantage of the full power of the technology that's out there. A good visualization should generate questions, and that's why we like to talk at PDS about the analytics trio. And what we mean by that is the visualization, which then leads to the slice and dice, which then leads to the detailed information. We want to make that integrated, seamless, and easy. What we see a lot of times, though, is some challenges can really arise in organizations where they may be using different tools to do all of these things. So an organization may, for example, have detailed reporting coming from business objects, but then they are using a visualization software like Tableau, and then for their slice and dice, they may be trying to use like Microsoft Cubes or something like that. The issue that you have is those don't necessarily play well together. They don't speak the same language, and a lot of times when you're trying to move from one to another, you have to recreate each report or each query in order to get to where you want to go. And the underlying data may not be the same for those source reports that are out there. And so those reports may not balance one to another. They may be different in terms of what they're trying to do. And you're not getting that single source of truth, which is really necessary for good analytics. What you want to do is you want to have kind of that single seamless system that's out there where everything is coming from the same system, and it's all attached to the one single data mart or system of data marts underneath which feed the whole thing. That way you have one source of truth. You can go from visualization directly to slice and dice, directly to detail reporting easily and seamlessly. So you don't have kind of discord between the 3 members of the trio, which is really throwing off your data. Instead, they're all working together with that underlying data to really bring harmony to your analytics that are out there.
Yeah, Scott, I think that single source of truth is really important with your analytics strategy. Let's take a look at an example of that analytics trio that you just talked about, Scott. So here's a visualization where I've blended multiple metrics. I've got revenue data with collection and patient satisfaction. I've actually blended multiple systems together. I can work with the dashboard. It's very interactive. It looks visually appealing. But what's nice with that analytics trio is I can go from this visualization down in the bottom. I've got some key metrics where I can go ahead and select a month that I then want to go ahead and slice and dice into. So now I'm into an analytics report where I can slice and dice through the data. I can, as an end user, I can select different payer categories. I can change my report. I can add elements that may have not been on the original report. So adding location categories, moving them, and then even selecting a particular provider. So once I've gone ahead and worked with the slice and dice report, I can go to that third level, which is the detail. So I can select a particular month for this particular provider, and I can get down to the detail. I can get down to those individual invoices or transactions where then I can continue to work with my report. I can continue to modify and even move things up to different areas. So I'm actually summarizing it in different categories. So I can continue to work with the data. So I've got this detailed data that then I can go back up to that slice and dice, and then I can go all the way back to that visualization. So I can go down and up. So that's really what you were talking about with that analytics trio.
Yeah, and so you can see right here why this technology that's out there, this is why we want to get to where we want to get to. If we're truly trying to be data driven, we need to have information at our fingertips. We need to be able to drill through it, to be able to analyze why we're seeing what we're seeing, and then that detail information to really help dig in and identify, outliers or problems that may exist. So why aren't we all there then? This is something that we all want to see, but it's really challenging to get there. The biggest issue that a lot of people have is that it takes a healthy data model in order to be able to do this effectively. And let's face it, we're healthcare. We have a lot of systems that we're working with, which is a lot of data that's out there, and probably your data is a mess. And really, if you want to be the most effective you can be with this, you need to get your data organized into a really comprehensive and effective data model in order to really drive that forward. Obviously, there are going to be costs that are involved depending upon the number of users. There's licensing costs, there's server costs, there's personnel issues with regards to training and expertise, and you may need to hire more people to be able to do it. And then once you get to that, you have the reports that you already have and migration that's impacted with that. And so these are all things that need to consider, and it can be time consuming in order to get to that spot. So this is a strategy that really needs to be built within an organization looking forward in the long term.
Yeah, so Scott, that's great for a long-term solution, but users want data now. I hear every day organizations saying, I must get user data today. I can't wait. The data modeling, I don't have time for all of that data modeling, which takes time and expertise. Today people may not have the budget in order to implement what you were just referring to as a full analytic solution. So how might we take advantage of the tools that we have in our hands today and in order to enable people to get the data that they want now?
Yeah, I know I've managed medical practices, and one of the biggest problems that I had, or biggest frustrations, was inability to get to data right away. And my recommendation for that is, start with what you have, and what you have is Excel. Everybody has it, it's available, it's been around for 30, 40 years. It's, people know how to use it, it's easy. Comes pretty standard. There aren't a lot of licensing issues with it. And I think, as we're going to show here, even though it's Excel, that doesn't mean it has to be ugly.
Yeah, Scott, that's definitely true. Just here's an example where you may have originally seen those 4 charts in Excel, and that would have been great to show some patient satisfaction. But what we've done here is really added a background behind those charts, and then added, highlighted in the left hand in that little clipboard picture, some of the key metrics. So again, just adding a background, highlighting some key metrics, it really brings the dashboard to life and is way more appealing, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I think there's also a way to take this patient satisfaction data and even make it more granular without having to, you know, get into those crosstabs or, you know, a lot of those, you know, grids that we're looking at, where you can see here we've broken out the physician versus the care team, and we've quickly and easily highlighted areas where the, you know, there are struggles with certain questions with regards to patient satisfaction. And so taking that data more granular doesn't mean we have to be less visual.
Yeah, definitely, Scott. Here's another example where I've just got, you know, simple staffing dashboard. And what we've done to this is just added a few icons and really organized the data into 3 sections: cost management, staffing, and productivity. And then added just a few visualizations down the bottom so I can see maybe my staffing breakout, my productivity. So just by adding just a couple icons, I've really allowed the user to focus on some of those key metrics.
Yeah, and even, you know, reports where you may be getting good engagement right now, like provider compensation reports, they'll always look at those, but just by adding a couple of boxes and some you know, some graphics and things like that, it can really help bring some visual quality to it, where, you know, are the providers focusing on their RVU productivity? Are they looking at the clinic targets that they should be shooting for, or the incentive pools where they may be leaving some money with regard to their compensation on the table? Just giving them the ability to quickly and easily look at these things and look at the trend in their productivity can definitely be helpful and make the dashboards even a little bit more engaging.
Yes, definitely, Scott. That looks a lot nicer with those little different panels. Here's an example where I've got somewhat of a grid type looking dashboard. But what I like about this is that we're comparing actuals to external benchmarks. I'm using those AHAM access keys, where I can utilize, you know, conditional formatting and color, you know, red and green to highlight where I'm hitting against that target, or maybe I have some opportunities for improvement. And then even over on the right-hand side, I've got like a link to some additional detailed data. Obviously, depending on the size of your organization, you may not be able to give them a lot more data, but maybe you can give them a few supporting elements that are being part of that actual number. So just by adding some conditional formatting and just organizing the data in simple, easy to read format will really probably get you some more engagement.
Yeah, I think this looks really good, and I you know, we'll look at another example of where we did a redesign. You know, when we first designed this is a dashboard around charge edits, just the front end sitting in edits being held before it's sent off to a claim. I didn't really know how to do this other than kind of this graphical way that communicates fine, but it doesn't look that great. So we put some effort into this and redesigned it into a way that would be far more visual. And you can see right here, what we've done is we've taken kind of the 3 most key metrics with regard to that and really called those out. We've made the numbers big and apparent, and something that management can look at right away and know that their focus is there. And then we talk about, you know, the grids where we want to get more visual, but those grids that are out there, sometimes the grid is the best way to communicate. But what we've done with this is we've added some conditional formatting to it, where we've highlighted some of the outliers and some areas where it might require some immediate attention. So just by doing some simple things like that, it can really help out with making your dashboards more visual and really helping so that they don't have to digest a bunch of numbers. It's apparent immediately.
Yeah, Scott, I really like that grid with those percentiles highlighted. I think it, again, grid data sometimes, like you said, is the only way to communicate, but it allows me to focus on some areas where I may need to dig into those details and understand what's going on there. So we've looked at a couple examples where we've used some color and visuals to make the data more appealing in Excel. But Excel can also be interactive. So here's an example of a revenue and expense dashboard where we've just applied some simple slicers to the data. So I can look at my department overall, I can look at my net revenue against budget, I can look at my breakout of expenses, but then I can also within that department look at my individual divisions. So I don't have to open 4 or 5 different dashboards to understand how am I working at a department level. So using these slicers are really nice, makes one-stop shopping and makes it Excel more interactive like the visual dashboards that we showed earlier are. Another example, so here's another example of patient satisfaction data. And I like this. This is a mix of both making a dashboard interactive as well as using some color and graphics to highlight some key metrics. So I can easily see Todd Allen's doing very well. I've got a lot of green. That green target on the left-hand side shows his overall rating. But I've also got some grids which support the background of that overall rating. And then, you know, Charles Anderson's yellow, some areas of opportunity. So I'm using color, interactive, as well as some visuals to highlight those key metrics.
Yeah, and you know, this conditional formatting and moving like that really help with the, you know, not just the visualization, but also the, you know, again, drawing attention to what needs to be out there. So, you know, you can look at something like revenue integrity, which is a very, very key data set that's out there that also requires data from a lot of different sources. And so being able to apply that conditional formatting to look at trend indicators that show right away where, you know, where we're doing well or where there are areas where we may be struggling a little bit, taking advantage of some of the charting features within Excel where you're utilizing thresholds and viewing those for something around coding, which is not just a revenue issue and a productivity issue, but can also be a compliance issue. And so finding areas where, you know, there are big areas outside of those thresholds can help us maybe identify and correct issues that could be related to compliance before they become bigger problems. And then another advantage that Excel has sometimes over even some of these visualization tools is you may have something like you can see down in the lower right, the coding audits. Coding audit results may not and probably aren't stored within your data warehouse, so they're not necessarily easy to bring into visualizations, but they can be imported to Excel pretty easily. So there are some things that Excel does maybe even better than some of these visualization tools, and so I think that's why it can be an effective part of your strategy as you go forward with it.
Yeah, Scott, one of the things I like about Excel is you can even use, you know, call outs to provide definitions to dashboards. But just like in the examples that we showed, they look great in Excel, but you know, just like everything in life, you know, everything has its challenges. So Excel definitely has some challenges. Some of the key things that we've seen is so lack of collaboration. So every provider or every executive is receiving their own spreadsheet. So to try to collaborate amongst each other to talk about, you know, how are you going to improve this, that can be somewhat of a challenge using Excel. I talked a little bit about the ability to drill down to detail. So depending on the size of your organization, you're probably going to have to keep that to a very limited drill capability. And then automating and refreshing, you know, hundreds of thousands of provider dashboards every month is going to be very time consuming. Doing that manual cut and paste process, you know, people are human, they're going to make mistakes, so you're going to have some increased errors. And then Scott, this would be pretty time consuming if I've got to create thousands of Excel dashboards. Would you not agree?
No, that's definitely true. And I will say, for those who are struggling with that, PDS does have a tool that helps to automate the creation and bursting of these dashboards, so that it can take a lot of that manual process out of that. So it can automatically update, whether you're doing, daily dashboards, weekly, monthly. It takes out that manual intervention of the copying and pasting, and it does it automatically. So that takes away a lot of the errors as well. And it makes it so that the users aren't spending all of their time just making and distributing dashboards. They can actually take the data and not just create these dashboards, but they can actually use the data to manage, which is really the whole purpose why we're trying to do this.
Thanks, Scott. So Excel and the visual tools can work really well together. We talked about the challenges of getting data modeled and getting the expense of getting the analytics installed. Well, take advantage of Excel either as a prototype to your data model, making sure you've got the business logic is accurate, making sure that the end users are getting the key metrics that they need to manage. And use Excel to really go visual. So maybe you can take that data and import it and see how you might be able to create a visualization. And then use your Excel visualizations to know what you want to build in the web. And Excel, you're most likely using it today, so there's really probably no increase in cost. So it can help leverage that and get you to a full visualization a little bit quicker. But really, no matter what tool you're using, whether you're using Excel, Power BI, Tableau, what's most important is that you get the right analytics to the right audience. So for example, a provider, like Scott had showed earlier, we may just want to look at one or two key metrics. So patient satisfaction, and look at my first few key metrics. So an Excel analytics or dashboard might be great for that individual provider. However, when we looked at the reimbursement for the executives with that multi-page dashboard, that's probably something that they're going to want to use. They want something that's going to, where are my key metrics? How am I doing? How can I look at them in one place? And then the operations or analyst users really want that full analytics trio that we talked about. They want to be able to look at the visual. I want to be able to slice and dice, so when they get asked additional questions, they can support their data and then even get into the detail. Maybe they need to create worksheets for folks to look at denials or make calls for wellness visits. So it really, you want to make sure you get the right analytics into the right hands of the users. Let's look at an example. So here's an example of Excel for a provider dashboard. I'm looking at my HCC. This is an individual provider. And really, I'm just trying to communicate how many more patients do you need to see this year. I can see I've got 27 more patients. I can see that I'm at 80% completion rate. I've got a graphic at the bottom, sort of like a thermometer, where I see I have a goal of 109. I can see how many more I have to do. And then I've got some key metrics at the top comparing, last year to this year and where I am so far year to date. So again, few key metrics, great for a provider to give them those answers.
Yeah, and this is great for a provider to give them just a quick overview of what's out there. But when we're talking about HCCs and how absolutely critical something like HCCs are for management, executives, medical directors, this is something where we just really need a lot more information that's out there. HCCs isn't just about stratifying populations, but it's something where it's a quality issue, it's a continuity of care issue. And so we really need to be able to look at, what are the conditions that we're working with? What are the populations that we have? What are the risks of our patients that we're working with? And really start to dig in and find more the information that we need to be able to get to. And again, we may need to go to another page where we can really start looking at how we can be proactive. Because again, when we talk about, wellness visits, we need to be able to schedule these wellness visits every year so that we can get our patients appropriately coded and understand all of the conditions that we're working with. And we may have higher risk patients that are out there that are past due for a wellness appointment, don't have anything scheduled, whether it's a wellness visit or a care visit. And we can find, just patients that are out there where we can even just create work lists of patients that we need to become more proactive with and contact so that we can get them into our office. So this is another example of ways that we can utilize the visualizations to help us do our jobs better from a quality standpoint as well as a reimbursement standpoint.
Yeah, so Scott, speaking of reimbursement, we can also use the visualization. So here's an example where I'm looking at the financial opportunity related to my wellness visits. I can see, so how many of my providers are either above my department average and how many are below my department average. And if I focus on those lower providers, what's my total opportunity to increase some revenue within the organization? So I can use the visualization. I can easily look at the data using the visuals to really understand where there's some opportunities here.
Yeah, so, if we want to get into just a couple of key takeaways from today, obviously visualization's where we want to go. That's the strategy that's going to best allow us to become data-driven because it's giving us the data that we need at our fingertips. It's helping us to drive questions, give us the ability to analyze and move further and then get down to the detail level. So it's something that we really need to move to, but we know it can be time consuming and we've got to manage with data now. I don't know how you manage without data. And so you can utilize Excel in the interim to get your results quickly, lower cost, and you can utilize Excel to really pilot where you want to be when you are able to implement your visual capabilities. And even after you have implemented visual, you probably want to use the two in conjunction with each other. There may be some where Excel is an appropriate tool to get people the information that they need and then just deploy the visual and the analytics trio to those who need it that way. And so really, it's a key part of the overall analytics strategy that we should have within our organizations.
Yeah, Scott, whether you're using visual analytics or Excel, or like you said, using them both together, I think the key takeaway is to ensuring that you're getting the users the data that they need to manage effectively, getting the right information into the right users with the appropriate analytics strategy. That's really the key takeaway, I think, from today's webinar.
Thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.